shoreline patrol to make sure everything was safe, nothing was broken loose, and getting a visual on all of our city mooring fields to see if any boats were adrift.
So we're heading north into the top end of Warwick Cove. It narrows up quite a bit here. This is where it gets kind of intense at times in a storm. This is where I noticed, after the storm, a yellow and white sailboat that had never been there before. So we had decided we'd better investigate and see if there was somebody on the boat, wanted to make sure that the boat had control.
So at that point, I maneuvered to the Stark-Capella boat and tied up alongside it. Called down at the cabin to see if anybody was there and got no response. Looked inside, and the interior of the boat was a mess. All of the furnishings of the interior of the boat, cushions, blankets, pillows, were all piled up on the floor, as well as boxes and cans and bottles, things like that. Not unusual for a boat that has been in a storm.
The boat was what we call the vessel not under command. So at that point, we have to basically take control of the boat and make it safe. So I decided to remove it to a dim.
Swarms of black flies, maggots. So I started lifting up cushions, blankets, pieces of plywood that were all piled up, and I discovered a body. It was a shock. It was a shock. It was almost nauseating. I mean, how long has he been here? Was this something did this happen during the storm? Maybe he had gotten hurt on the boat. Maybe he hit his head.
Once I found him, then we brought the boat to this dock here, and this is where the police department, fire department met the boat.
I was the detective sergeant in charge of detectives. Anytime you respond out to a death that wasn't viewed by somebody, the nature and cause of death could be a wide range. It could be an unattended death, it could be a suicide, it could be an accidental, or it could be a homicide. We spoke to the harbor master, Barris, and he explained to us that this was the second time he had come in contact with that boat after the macro burst. You're looking at the state of the inside of the boat. We definitely thought the entire scene could have played out as a result of injuries sustained from the macro burst. With no ventilation, the decomposition was definitely sped up drastically. You really couldn't tell how long he'd been there, if there were knife marks or bullet holes, because there's no flesh at that point to see obvious signs. So the identity of the deceased was still unknown due to the state of decomposition. So we have to wait for the medical examiner to complete their autopsy to determine the cause of death.
I am a board-certified forensic pathologist. My only legal jurisdiction is over the body and any items on the body. When I evaluate, I'm always looking at what's on or associated with the body. And sometimes that can provide very important clues. This is the autopsy. A decomposed, partially skeletonized male body. There's no eyes. There's no soft tissues of the mouth. His upper half is skeletonized. The first thing that strikes me is the poor condition of the body. It's the peak of humid summer here. And it was an aquatic environment, it's the water, so there's definitely humidity at play. It's a rather small vessel, so that almost has like a greenhouse effect. And so during this time, you get the decomposition. I'm looking at his body, there is also a t-shirt wrapped around his neck, his head area, and it was very odd. I didn't see any big injury right off the bat on the head or neck, but I need to look further. I take pictures of the back of the body, and there's so many maggots on the body, innumerable, that they're constantly moving and eating away at the tissue. So they're not only taking away the tissue I need, they're poking holes in it, literally, but it's making the evaluation that much more complicated. And so it is sort of a horrendous situation because all of these changes make it so difficult to see what's underneath. I have a dead male that's unrecognizable. There's not even a tattoo that I can see to have a lead on it. I have a lot of work ahead of me to try to figure out who he is and what happened to him, as well as why he died.
Put your future first with a transformative educational experience. Take advantage of 100% online learning, flexible start dates, and generous scholarship opportunities. And get personalized support from expert faculty who can help you go the distance. Start your student success journey today at baker.edu.
Man, I can't stop eating these.
What? They're for the neighbors. Maybe I should start my own stand.
Hey, hello to your new favorite snack.
Sweet and salty.
Hey, check this out. Great for football watch parties. Tell your friends.
Hey, Pete, check this out. What I'm talking about. The new King's Hawaiian pretzel bites.
Irresistibly sweet and salty. Hey, what's this button?
No!
Sorry.
At Galen College of Nursing, we believe in treating our students as humans. We teach them compassion by showing compassion, by providing the education they'll need tomorrow, along with the support they need right now.
Through my work, I learned that civic engagement was key to the fight for immigration reform. If we don't go out to vote as Latinos and immigrants, we lose that opportunity to say, I voted for you and this is what I need. It doesn't matter who your political party is. Be committed to your fight. Take action and go vote.
For more voices impacting our culture and their communities, visit aetv.com/voicesmagnified.
When I'm trying to come up with how am I going to identify this person, that's really when I have to have an open line of communication with Warwick's police and ask, like, do you have anything that indicates who this is?
Our detectives did an inventory of the Star Capella home. We were actually able to find an old registration which had Fernando Silva's name on it. So at that point, we felt pretty confident that the boat still belonged to Mr. Silva. However, the identity of the deceased was still unknown due to the state of decomposition.
The boat was registered to a Mr. Fernando Silva. That gave me a lead as to who this might be, but yet that's not confirmed. A hunch is not good enough for me to sign a death certificate. One of the strongest things in your body is your teeth. So we use dental records as a form of identification. Now that we have a lead as to who it is, and I have natural teeth that are still there, I could ask the police to then call the family and say, hey, did he have a dentist? Did he ever have any sort of x-ray once you get the dental records? He is quickly identified as Mr. Fernando Silva.
My brother Freddie was born in 1945. He was 10 years older than I was. And he was a wonderful brother to me. I never felt like I was ever underfoot with him. He always made me feel part of whatever he was doing. He really made me feel special. He drafted during the Vietnam War. He served his time. He loved this country with all his heart. Freddie just loved people. He was very gregarious. He was very fun-loving, easygoing. He had this beautiful, wavy, dark hair and beautiful brown eyes and wonderful smile. So he was kind of a ladies' man until he met his wife-to-be. I was a little kid, but I could tell she was really beautiful. My parents loved her to death. And so he married her, and they had two beautiful boys. He was always raving about his two sons to anybody that would listen. But Freddie and his wife eventually grew apart, and he went his way and she went hers, and he made sure everything was taken care of for them. And then he retired shortly after that. When he retired, he decided, well, I'm gonna get a sailboat and live on a sailboat. It's more economical, and I'm gonna do it. He just loved the freedom of being able to just go where he wanted to go when he wanted to go, and that's the kind of person he was. After the storm, we got very little information. We just knew he was dead on his boat. You want quick answers, and that's not possible, and I never realized that till you're in it yourself.
From the family, I learned that his primary residence was the boat, which is not uncommon in our ocean state. This is a 7-year-old man who's gone through rocky storms on this boat, and the water's been choppy. It's a wet environment. Did he slip and fall and hit his head? Was it because just nature throwing the boat around? And that was my job to figure out. I've done a lot of decomposed cases, but when you have nearly skeletonized remains with trauma, that is one of the hardest autopsies to perform. It's just a very step-by-step, careful approach. There were multiple displaced ribs on the right side of his body. He has brittle bones, but how did these ribs come to be broken? When I looked inside, most everything was gone from decomposition. And then finally, I had to look at his neck. I was able to cut out the structures that were still there. A lot of it has melted away, basically. But there's a very important bone called the hyoid bone at the base of your tongue, underneath your chin, and it's similar to a wishbone. And I first took it out, it was definitely irregular and fractured. Why is the broken hyoid bone so significant? It's a marker for a lot of pressure put on the neck or strangulation. The constellation of findings after the initial looks very concerning because he has broken bones and he has the hyoid injury, but what does this mean? I'm pretty sure it's not a natural death. I really need more analysis to help. Now I need to analyze his bones with the defleshing process, taking the bones apart from their joints and then cleaning them. I've only had to do this a handful of times in my life to this extent. You can't expedite it because if you try to rush it, it might degrade the bone. The bone's brittle, it'll fall apart, and then you don't have anything to analyze. It's a one-way street. You can't undo it.
Man, I can't stop eating these.
What?
They're for the neighbors. Maybe I should start my own stand. Hey, hello to your new favorite snack.
Sweet and salty.
Hey, check this out. Great for football watch parties. Tell your friends.
Hey, Pete, check this out. What I'm talking about. New King's Hawaiian pretzel bites.
Irresistibly sweet and salty. Hey, what's this button? No! Sorry.
Just how much has Washington changed Sherrod Brown? When he wanted our vote, he said this.
Widely
agents will be to Ohio.
To Ohio? Sherrod Brown voted for amnesty for 11 million illegals. And he voted to give them taxpayer-funded benefits like free health care, Social Security, COVID relief checks, paid for by you. That's not voting for Ohio. Sherrod Brown is way too liberal for Ohio. American Crossroads is responsible for the content of this advertising.
In the 1970s, Houston was known as the murder capital of the nation. Cases would sit there unsolved. The Hispanic community didn't trust the police officers.
Let's get off your speak Spanish and start with special squad.
Working all these types of cases: murders, robberies, extortion, rapes, kidnappings.
We couldn't believe what we were seeing.
We had to prove ourselves. It was sink or swim. Chicano Squad had an impossible job to do.
After my brother Freddie was found dead on his boat. It was excruciating for me. I mean, I didn't eat. I was always upset. Well, the detective said, we don't know exactly what has happened to him, but we're investigating. And of course you want to know. Well, what are you investigating? Well, right now we can't say. So it was very heart-wrenching and very stressful for us because they had no real answers at that time.
As a newspaper person here and being embedded in the community, I was sad to learn that it was Freddie. The nature of how he died was not clear at that point. It wasn't clear until Storm had anything to do with it because it was really severe. So that was a theory that was being bounced around.
Captain Freddie was found deceased on the boat, and the weather had been very difficult. It was a storm that really dislodged a lot of boats. You know, maybe the boat was like jostling around. So is there something that accidentally happened and took his life, or is there something much worse? There's open communication with the Warwick police, but this answer is taking much longer than normal. And I just say, you have to be patient. I have to be able to do what I need. But by initial overview, manner of death is undetermined.
Dr. Priya Manager stated that at the time, there wasn't any obvious signs as a manner of death and cause of death. But as an investigator, when you're not sure 100% on a cause of death, you feel like you have to keep digging, and since we had concrete information of that, I did see him as Mr. Fernando Silva, we decided to continue our investigation. Once you find out who the victim is, you then try and figure out exactly what his habits are, what he likes to do, who his friends are, who he associates with. In his inner circle, exactly what Mr. Silva was about.
I remember Freddie as being adventuresome, getting out there in the rough water and battling the elements and coming out ahead.
He said, this is what I want to do as a retired person. But because he was so friendly, mostly every morning, he would get up and go to the local convenience store, get his cigarettes, get his cup of coffee, and sit and play a game of Keno.
Keno is one of those games that, depending on your luck, you can win up to a couple of $1,000. Freddie struck it rich from his perspective, certainly, when he ended up winning $400 in Keno.
He won more than anybody I ever knew.
Everybody stated that he had a keen desire for Keno, which did result in winning several times and sharing in his winnings with his family and friends. I mean, everybody that we spoke to on his behalf thought he was the nicest guy.
This is one of the most challenging cases I've done in my career because the condition of the body was so decomposed. I was concerned about the neck and the ribs. wounds and the tissue just gently stir. And a lot of it is patience. It has to be very carefully monitored. The most alarming thing that I found was this area on the right side. This is blood. This is like discolored blood. So a big bruise on his scalp bled and then stained the bone. So that tells me that's true injury. The injury to the head, it could be a kick, a hit with a blunt object. We were able to see that the ribs were fractured, not just in one place, but along each rib. That's quite consistent with being beaten with an object. And then there's a white shirt in the neck area. A man doesn't generally wear a shirt that way. Also, the hyoid bone was confirmed to have a fracture. I could see that it was splintered. I'm thinking he was strangled with that shirt. So it's all sort of coming together. There's no way I can have all this happen to him accidentally. There's nothing else that it could be other than homicide.
We received the information back from Dr. Priya Banerjee about the conclusion of her investigation regarding the death of Mr. Silva. She's determined that there was multiple blunt force trauma and several broken bones, which led to her determination of a homicide and not bodily harm done as a result of the storm. Now we have to find out who committed the crime. The media had the news story of an unattended death on the news that night, so we had slowly started receiving some tips of anything suspicious involving that boat. One of the witnesses informed us that sometime in late July, early August, he had observed the boat tying up to a dock. He approached the boat and spoke to Fernando Silva and asked him why he was docking there. Mr. Silva had stated that there was a subject by the name of Ducky Waterman who had given him permission to dock his boat there and had already paid Mr. Waterman for the slip. He also stated that on the early morning of August 1st, he had seen two gentlemen walking with a cooler and a gas can down to the Star Capella. And the two gentlemen stated that they were there to help out Fernando Silva start the boat. He was also able to give us the fact that they were driving a maroon Dodge pickup truck. You know, in his words stated, he kept extra careful eye on them over the next couple of days, which they returned several times to visit. The next step in the investigation, we spoke to Dr. Waterman. We asked him about two people that were described to us. He said those two people had been at his place recently. He knew one is Troy Gundaway. We were able to locate the subject named Troy. We asked him if he had been in the area of the marina, which he acknowledged. He was actually very calm, very cooperative. States that he was there to help get a motor started. We asked him who the second subject was. He stated that it was